Okay, so I don't have a mic over here, so um, I'll ask the questions. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. But Grandma,
Yes.
this is a mother and son podcast. We've got Mike here,
Yes.
Mike and Betty.
We're very happy to have Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, very happy. So we're gonna do a bit of a mother and son podcast.
Very fine.
Okay,
Appreciate you doing that, Christian.
of course.
Yep.
So Betty, what was Mike like growing up? Were there any quirks or talents that stood out to you when he was at an early age?
What was Mike like as he was growing up? He was always actually a very obedient little fellow. And he had an older sister who helped with watching over him. So he was a pretty happy little camper, and I have to say he was a very much a joy.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a good little
He
fellow.
was a good kid.
Yeah.
Good.
And I got to be in the first grade and did very well in school. So I just have great memories.
You were a good
Yeah.
kid, Mike.
Yeah.
Mike, what's something about your mom's role in the family that you only came to appreciate as an adult?
Hmm. Being a parent's tough. Now I know as an adult, how hard it is to raise kids, and a lot of times when parents are watching over you, you think it's a little bit, too much sometimes when you're a kid.
Sure,
You're like,
yeah.
I'm good without that.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing that my mom was always watching over me and keeping track of me and making sure I didn't get in trouble or,
Yeah.
have an issue, she was always, so I think I appreciate that later. She was a good caregiver for me.
She definitely is. Betty, is there a moment from Mike's childhood or teenage years that stands out as really shaping your bond between you two?
Say that again, please.
Is there a moment from Mike's childhood or teenage years that stands out as shaping your bond? We can come back to it if you want.
The last three words I couldn't understand.
Shaping your bond, like you
Shaping our
guys,
bond,
yeah, you guys'
absolutely.
bond together.
Sure. I have to think about a particular moment. I will tell you an interesting little story
Sure.
that happened early on when we came to California. And we lived in a rental house for probably 3 to 4 months. It was a family that the church knew about who was going to be away for several months, and it made the house become available for us to rent. So we lived in that house across from the Manzanita School,
Mm-hmm.
and very soon after that, the folks whose house it was, who were renting it, needed to come back, but we also had the opportunity from one of the men and his wife who was moving back down to the valley where they had a different house. They offered to sell us their house on 32nd Street. So, as we moved to 32nd Street, this is a story I was going to share with you. Now, Mike was a little fellow, barely over a year old.
A little fella.
Yes. And I have pictures I was going to share over there, but I'll do that a different time. Anyway, this is the famous story, and you can look it up in history about a little girl named Jennifer Flowers who had been found murdered in the desert, and it was within eyesight of the house we lived in. You could look out and see the little cluster of bushes that had grown up in the desert area where she was found. And they did not know who had done this. So that was pretty scary thing. And Mike was just little, and I would allow him, after we moved after the first 3 months and were able to buy the house on 32nd Street, which is, by the way, a very interesting thing. Probably $5,000 or $6,000 is all we paid for it. And that was our first purchase. It was just a miracle that we were able to purchase that. So he was in the backyard and was playing. Regina was off at school in kindergarten. And I kept thinking, I need to keep an eye on Mike. I just always watched him carefully anyway. But he was just playing in the backyard, but I would just watch him carefully. And I want you to know that when they found out who had done that murder, it was a young man who was one house straight behind and one over. And that's the distance he was. So there was a reason I had been instinctivly watching, and the good Lord was kind of telling me that, I guess.
Wow.
But that's where they found out. It was a young boy, and he had just done that, and that was a thing that made me realize, But your question about the bonding time,
Yeah.
I think that I always loved my children, and it was just a kind of a growing thing all the time.
Yeah.
And I was always proud of them, and I just can't say of one instance of a bonding. If I think of it, I'll be glad to share it with
problem.
you. Yeah.
This next one's for Mike. Mike, is there a difference in how you and your mom approach life because of your different upbringings?
Yeah, I'd say there's a couple differences. I'd say, my mom was raised on a farm, and I think was always taught a high level of respect for, people in the community or people with certain titles. Maybe it's a lawyer or,
Sure.
a police officer or what have you. And I still have that level of respect for folks. But I think with my experience, in work, I've met a lot of lawyers, and I've, known a lot of people in the community, and I will probably look at them a little bit differently in the sense that, just because you have a title doesn't mean you're to be respected.
Sure.
I think it's really about the person. I don't know, Mom, would you agree with that? That
Yes,
you probably
I
were
would.
raised with
I
a real
was-
high level of respect for titles.
Yeah, I was taught to always be mindful of anybody older than me, or definitely someone who had a position of responsibility. I would be taught. That's how we learn down through the years, the different kinds of respect for different things and values in life. And that's how we learn, is from something we've been taught, but we kind of look at that as far as respecter of persons as almost like a little scriptural kind of thing. You're just kind of taught to be mindful and caring of certain people. They've earned that little respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To go back to the question you asked my mom about bonding and stuff, one thing that I felt was a bonding time for my mom and I was later on when I was actually out of high school. We spent a period of time where she and I would meet for lunch at Bob's Big Boy.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes, I do.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I just try to make I don't know, it's like one of those things where you realize I went through high school and, kind of doing my own thing a little bit there. And I think I came to a realization that, you're never going to have people that have your back more than your family.
That's true.
And your friends are friends, but they're only so deep,
Sure.
That was a special time.
Yeah.
And I would go off to work at a certain hour on the bus to Burbank
Right.
after that, and I
Right.
just looked forward to the meeting time with Mike, and it was family, it was important, and I just treasured it.
It
Yeah.
was kind of a unique time,
Yeah.
real short. It wasn't like, it may
Yeah.
have been 6 months or something. I don't know, maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah. Could have
But
been.
we'd meet at the one in Lancaster,
Yes.
across from Reed Callender's. I don't know if that's all that stuff's still there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but it was right there
That's great.
by the Bobs.
I love
Yes, you're right. Brings back memories.
that. This next one's for Betty. Was there a specific event or time that brought you and Mike closer? And you can think about this if you'd like.
That is one of the things that Mike just mentioned. The fact that we were brought a lot closer and able to kind of just be natural with each other when everything else was complicated in life, so to speak, and it was a good time.
Yeah,
The bonding that we did right then.
that's good.
Yeah.
Mike, is there a trait or interest you have that you were surprised to realize you shared with your mom?
Yeah, I think when you're trying to figure out who you are, you go to school, you see what you're good at with school, whether it's math or art or English or what have you. And then you kind of identify, I identified a lot with my dad because, my dad was, the pastor, but he was also outgoing and so I thought, well, I'm more like my dad, and I am a lot like my dad in a lot of ways, but I also realized that I have a little bit of my mom's personality in that I'm a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, sensitive, or it's more reserved, or I definitely will talk, as you know, which I get from my dad. My mom's not a big talker. But I have I don't know if it's a sensitivity or what would you call it, Mom? I know I have some of her characteristics, so it's one of those things. I didn't realize it until I was older, but I would have Regina, your mom, or others that knew me well, and go, oh, you're like your mom in that way, or and it would be definitely that we share some of those characteristics. And it could be just, my dad had a lot of these skill traits too, but it's like she can spend time by herself and not need to have interaction with other people and be totally comfortable.
Sure.
And I have that too. I can totally spend time by myself. I'm probably more extroverted though than my mom is in a lot of ways, but anyway, so we share some of those things together, don't you think?
I think so.
Very nice. Let me see here. What's one of the most memorable trips or adventures you've been on together, and why does it stand out? You guys did a lot of trips and driving.
Yeah.
And cross country, right?
Yeah, I did a few of those.
You and my mom.
Oh,
In the
yeah.
back of the station wagon, right?
Yeah, the Volkswagen. I can speak to some of this.
Mike, go ahead. Why don't you start?
Yeah. No, there's a couple that, the one I remember really strongly is when, your mom and I would just driving through Needles, California. It's really hot. We had no air conditioning in our car. and we're driving to Ohio. We do this every other year. It would take 4 or 5 days. And I remember that really clearly. We would be, when we were really younger, we would both kind of lay out in the back of the Volkswagen. My mom had made these mattresses that you could put back there and slide out there. So we'd lay on those and go to sleep, and it was just great, But we'd have all this stuff wrapped around us, whether it was suitcases or food. My mom would pack for the trip.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
And we would do that. So I remember, young years, I remember that a couple times. And then I remember later on, there was one year where your mom and I came up with this thing. I'm sure we've shared it with you, but we were making these funny voices, and she would call me Brother Weed, and I would call her Sister Petunia. So she'd go, I'd say, Sister Petunia, and she'd go, yes, Brother Weed. And we would just joke around about that, and I know my mom would laugh, but my dad would get so mad. He would go, shut up in the back seat, you guys be quiet. He never really said shut up, but he would
No.
say other words that meant that.
Yeah.
And he would get so mad, then he'd start swinging his hand, trying to get us to shut up. I'd be like dodging him. Do 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 do. It was really funny. So that was one trip, and then the other classic trip, and it all involves your mom too, is the one where we had that old Wayfarer tent trailer, and we had Dad had found some special glue to patch the whole thing up. And your mom was at this age where she was really concerned about how she looked and did not want to go with the family. She was very embarrassed. Mm-hmm. Our car looked like the Beverly Hillbillies, clamp it car. And I was like, I kind of didn't care, but I didn't love it, But she was put out, she did not want to ride in that, put the tent up. And I know we have that one experience where we're parked between these two really nice motorhomes, and they're looking out at us, and we're undoing the tent. And, my dad is he doesn't care. He's doing it, and we got it, and it's paid for. It's his week off. Yeah. And we're undoing this thing, and it starts to rip. And these people are sitting there laughing, looking at us, sitting in their motorhome, fancy.
Yes, fancy. I remember that.
Classic.
That was up in Oregon, too.
Oh, we went all the way to Oregon doing that.
Yeah.
I remember that in Solvang. Is where I remember
do you?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Buellton.
Buellton, yeah.
I remember
Oh,
that
yeah,
one.
we did that quite often.
Bit of an improv question, and I've heard a lot about this from my mom. And I know you guys went back to Ohio every other year, but what your grandma? What are your memories of your grandma? And I don't know. I've never really talked to you about your grandma.
So, Grandma was very practical, and she was all about, she was a worker. She was not a. She really missed my mom a lot. My mom had a really close bond. But we'd go back there, and she was just very not fancy. She would wear really plain clothes, work clothes a lot. She'd wear T-shirts and stuff, but, she was not about dressing up and doing fancy things. And, I think with our life with the church, Dad would always wear suits, and, Mom would dress up more with dresses and stuff, but Granny was not that way. She was like a very casual person. She could dress up, she was not unwilling to do that, but that's just not how she lived her normal life. And but I remember her getting up in the morning and going into the kitchen. And the kitchen was pretty small, but she would keep it kind of warm. It was always warm in there. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's because the stove was always running.
Yeah.
It was kind of hot. So you go in there and you're like, when people get older and they must want it warmer. I don't know if that's how she liked it or not, but it was just always warm to me. Mm-hmm. And so it would always be kind of nicer outside. But she'd go in there and make breakfast, and she liked doing that. She'd like to make, stuff for us for breakfast. But she liked honeycomb cereal. That was her favorite.
Oh, really?
She always bought honeycomb. She'd get store-bought ice cream. She thought that was pretty nice.
Oh, yeah.
That was a special treat. We'd drive down to the IGA, small market.
Yeah.
Was it in Georgetown?
Mm-hmm.
And that was her place to go shopping. But it's as big as you ever been to an Aldi? You know how big those are?
Small.
Yeah.
It's like the size of an Aldi. Yeah, they're real small. But that was our grocery store, or her grocery store. But then she would go out in the garden every day and weed a little bit in the morning, go out there and pick the weeds out.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd watch that garden and keep it going. But yeah, I have a lot of memories for going out there and seeing Granny, and we would sit at the kitchen table, and she had really older furniture, probably 1960s, 70s, type furniture. And I just remember those chairs that kind of had like plastic seats, and
Oh yeah.
I can't remember that clearly.
She had little wooden chairs in the kitchen,
Okay, wooden
the
chairs.
kitchen table.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of something different. But
Yeah.
anyway, and then she would talk about neighbors a lot. She would talk about the guy that works over here and this guy over here, and she kind of just talk about local gossip,
Yeah.
Yeah.
wouldn't she?
Yeah.
She would do a lot of that, and she'd say, "I'm not letting him, do this, and I'm not doing that." And she would talk about all things she wasn't going to do.
Yeah.
She was pretty tough, actually. She was not a pushover.
Yeah.
She was all serious, all business.
Nice. And you guys went back every other year?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Wow.
And she came out this way.
every other.
The
We saw her
opposite.
every year.
Yeah.
She just,
I
yeah.
didn't know that.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
The years we didn't go back there, she came out here.
Oh, and she just drove out? 'Cause
No,
you said
no.
She'd never.
She flew.
Oh, she flew.
She flew.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure it was expensive for her to buy that ticket.
You know, it was. And she came out 2 years in a row the year that Rod had his heart surgery because we, thought we probably couldn't
Right.
make the trip back there that time. We still were not able to fly as far as financially. That was always
We
a
did
big
one
thing.
time we flew.
we did after I started to work.
Oh, that was it?
Yeah, yeah.
I never knew why we were
Yeah.
able to fly. We're like, we're flying?
Yeah.
Let's see. This one's for Betty. If you had to pick one word to describe Mike, what would it be and why? And Mike, same question to you. One question for your mom. I'm sorry, one word.
One
What word
word.
would you use to describe your mom?
I got to go second.
I'm going to say he's an achiever, even in school and all of his life, as far as we had different things happen during our lives, and he did not allow that to change his values. He kept just going straight on, and even in school, there was one time when I had a consultation with the teacher for, how they tell you how your student is doing in school. And it was so amusing. She said to me, well, I started to ask this question and was going to pose it to the class. And she said, Mike knew the answer and it flew everything out the window. So he answered it out loud. It was some kind of a little question that was going to cause them to have to be, each one taking a little guess or whatever. And he answered it right off the bat. So she says, that's all I can say. He just answered the question. And so she was indicating that he was really always enthusiastic and energetic about his studies and all that. So that was a fun little thing to hear, and that was always a thing that stuck out in my mind. She was pleased with that too, Of course I was too, but that was interesting because it was like an early on grade, like second or third, and he just popped up with the answer, and that just blew the whole class. And she had to laugh and tell me about that when came for the
that.
yeah.
And then Mike, did you want a second to think about it?
No, I mean, I can, there's a lot of words I could use for my mom, but I would say, my mom has always been supportive, and I'd say, you cannot question the level of support that she's given to everyone in her life.
That's true.
And, I mean, it's pretty powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, of course, Mom. It's who you are. You've always just been faithful, and there's lots of words to describe that support. But I would say just solid. I mean, my mom is okay. One other thing I would say about my mom. Now, she's sensitive, she's thoughtful, she's caring, she's all those things, but she's strong. And people don't know that about my mom.
Mm-hmm.
She's very strong. And she gets that from her mom.
Yeah.
And so it's like one of these things you could see my mom and she's quiet and kind of not in the front of everybody, but behind the scenes a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
A great supporter, but you cannot make her bend if she doesn't want to. If she doesn't want to bend, she will not bend. She is not, you will not bend her at all.
Yeah.
And, she's talking about these people that try to sell her stuff. And she's like, well, that man was trying to, and I put the no solicitation thing, and I'm not going to do that. And so my mom is, like I said, she's a lot stronger than you would think.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's a great word. I wholeheartedly agree.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, it's who you are.
Hmm.
Okay. What's one story you each love to tell about the other that never gets old?
Oh, geez.
And we can come back to this.
Never been told.
Never gets old.
Never gets old.
A story that never.
Oh, it never gets old.
Yeah,
Okay.
never gets old.
I could tell you lots of stories, but okay, I'll tell a story that never gets old. It's pretty funny. And this is kind of it ties into your mom, but it ties into she was aware of it, so it's pretty funny. Your mom worked at Caro's, right? And this is before I got a job there too. She got me a job there.
No, I didn't
So
know
I
that.
worked there later. Yeah, I was a busboy for about a year and a half. But she worked there longer than I did. She was a waitress there and then went to another place. But she would get, leftovers, and she had a big bag of like ribs that she had gotten from so, and she'd taken it off somebody's plate.
Okay.
And you might just so like we didn't have a lot of money growing up, right? So it's not like we were full of big bucks, so we didn't go out to eat that much. So she had this thing, this doggy bag in the fridge, and it had these ribs in it, and I'm like, I want to eat those things. So sure enough, she had gotten them for the dog, and I went in there and ate all these ribs up. And Regina comes in and she goes, "Where's the ribs?" And I was like, I'm like smiling. She goes, and she started laughing. Mom was there when she did it, and she goes, "Well, those are for the dog. I got those out of the trash." So that was funny. But I think you knew about that. You thought that was funny. I remember you
heard
laughing about that.
later. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that was stuff, and then, I mean, there's other things like it was usually about food. So another one I did, I would eat stuff. So I would be like, here's some food in the fridge. I'm going to eat it. So then my mom and dad went out to a nice dinner one night, and she had this Italian sandwich, and I was like, "Oh, that looks really good." And I ate a couple bites, and it was eggplant. I'm like, "Oh." She laughed about that. She said, "Oh, no, she's fine with me eating it. She could care less if I ate it.
Oh, that's funny.
It's good for you. It's eggplant."
Yeah.
So it's usually stuff like that I
Yeah.
remember.
Nice. Grandma, did you want to think about it?
I have to think about that one. That's
A
never been
story
told.
A story about Mike that never gets old.
It's
That you
never-
like telling.
Okay.
We can come back to it.
Okay. We'll come back to that one.
I know one that you could tell if you want.
Which?
When I took TOBY to the choir thing.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I'll tell one. It's
Okay.
pretty comical. We had a teacher at the high school who was very, what was his name?
Mr. Yale.
Mr. Yale, yes.
Your mom loved him, by the way.
And he was very, he wasn't austere, but he was kind of in that category, getting there. And serious about what he wanted accomplished. And he had the students prepared to do a presentation of a song. What's the name of that song, Mike?
Gotta quit kicking my dog around.
Gotta quit kicking that dog around. So the thing is, we had a little scroungy pup. Toby was his name. And
He was pretty ugly.
yeah, he was ruffled up a little bit. So anyway, these students were presenting a song in front of a whole group of people. It was like an audience full of, a high school.
150 people.
Yeah, 150 people or so. And they were getting ready to sing this song. And the presentation was supposed to be the idea that the students were doing a certain kind of a quality of a job singing. So they got up there, and Mr. Yale did not know this was going to happen. And Mike had taken our dog with him to hold him while they were singing this song. And Mr. Yale had
in high
not
school.
known about it. It was a big presentation, and Mr. Yale did not know he was going to do that. And they literally laughed, and it was a sensation to the thing. But when they got done singing, our dog let out a big howl, didn't he?
He went, "Hoo!" at the very
And
end.
it was just
Did he
perfect. He did. Toby, I wish we could have recorded that. But Toby let out a big howl afterwards. It was just sweet as it could be. And Mr. Yale got after Mike after that because he did not know he was bringing that dog.
I didn't get permission.
He did not ask.
I'd rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission.
That was
I did a lot of that stuff growing up. I
Yeah,
was little.
so that was absolutely a
that's a
highlight.
good one.
Yeah, it was so fun. I'm so glad you remembered that, Mike. And it was quite a treat for us, but we didn't know he wasn't allowed to take the puppy with him. So we thought it was just all part of the act, and it was wonderful.
Oh man.
You guys didn't know any better.
No, we didn't know any different. We didn't know you weren't supposed to take that dog with you.
Well, I didn't know I wasn't either until I did it.
Oh, you didn't. You
I
thought
just
that was
did
a
it.
good part
No,
of
I
a
just did
prop.
it.
It was good.
That's fine. Question for Mike.
Hmm.
Can you think of a time when your mom helped you see something in a new way?
I think, I'd have a couple girlfriends here or there growing up, and I know I'd have my heart broken a few times, and she would be the one she'd feel really bad, if I was pretty sad about it, and I think just having somebody there to be a shoulder to cry on if you're having a bad day. Grandpa would be more like, "Well, it'll be all right. There's more fish in the sea," But my mom would be like, "Oh, I'm feeling really bad." She felt bad, and so she would be more of, I don't know, just really compassionate
Sure.
for what I was going through. So I think that was, that was helpful. I mean, your mom's gonna have your back.
Sure.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
If you don't have your mom having your back, who has your back?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I'd say that's probably a good example of that.
Grandma, if you could give one wish for Mike's future, what would it be?
One wish
For Mike's future.
that he can have every day as a feeling of very calm security that he's in the Lord's hands and that everything will always be all right.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that. We're going to talk about Grandpa now. Okay. What is one lesson that you each learned from Rod that has stuck out to you?
from me?
I'm sorry, from Rod. So what's one lesson from Rod that stuck out?
One
Stuck with
lesson from Rod that has stuck out. I think I can say with great confidence that some of my strength, besides from my mother, has come from his living his life with a determination to never let anything overcome him, and to know that things would still be okay, and you keep moving forward and living one day at a time, just knowing that it's going to be all right. It doesn't mean you don't have pain, but it means you just keep moving forward, and he did that. That's one thing I learned from his life that
He did.
I witnessed because he lived it.
Mm-hmm.
He did. He had some hard things to live through as a young child,
Sure.
as a young man, and then with the church. There are always difficult situations, which he had a lot of good training in psychology, but it still does not stop all the pain that can happen when people are ugly.
Mm-hmm.
And he overcame a lot of that. He just kept going forward, knowing that the Lord had his back. So I'm very happy to say I learned that. And one thing I'll have to say, I did not know how smart Rod was until I started to read some of the scriptures and learn. But then I've gone back through some of the things that he has written and realized how deep the understanding was that he had to have to write that. Even the technical part of how to put together the sentences, the punctuation, the whole thing. So I have learned to respect his drive for the great knowledge he had too. But he had a wonderful example of life for me to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, when I think about my dad, a couple things I'd say. I thought everybody's dad was the same. You know, growing up, I thought everybody's dad would be the kind of dad like I had, and I realized later that I don't know anybody that's had a dad like mine. And one of the things I would say about him is that he was very wise. You know, so Grandpa was someone who you could ask a question about anything, and he would usually have a really well-reasoned answer. And there's a lot of people that are not wise that you'll meet in this world. I mean, you know a lot. I mean, they're impulsive, and I also learned that a lot of people that are fast decision makers. Grandpa was not. He was very reasoned. He was not a fast decision maker, but he was wise. So he would make a well-counseled decision. You know, he may have not asked a lot of people. He may have kind of come about that himself, but he was definitely good that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I really have a lot of respect for him that way. And I try to live my life the same way. So when I make decisions, I try to do it the same way. But the other thing is he had integrity. And I'm telling you, that is something that is so rare. I mean, I'll tell you this, and I maybe Mom heard him do it. I never heard my dad swear in my entire life. I never heard him swear. Talk about self-discipline.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about that. I mean, how many people could you put up to that standard? And you know, the thing is, he agreed to do a career or a calling that would put him under the highest level of scrutiny of anything, being a pastor.
Yeah.
And yet he lived up to that. Was he perfect? No. My dad wasn't perfect. but he was definitely an example to me, to others. So the thing is, I guess I would say, how has that helped me? How has that influenced me? I know it's possible. So a lot of people don't know that something's possible because they've never seen it done, but I've seen it done. And so I know that there's a standard out there that's very high,
Yeah.
but it's very doable, and it can be done with a sense of kindness and understanding and wisdom. It doesn't have to be, like some hard case type person that, is really rigid or, that kind of person either. I mean, it can be done with someone who had the kind of a really good balance of, like my dad did,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a compassion. He, like I said, he wasn't perfect, but he
Yeah.
had a lot of good things going for him.
That's great. I like that. Betty, what's one of your favorite memories of Rod as a husband? And Mike, what's a memory that stands out of him as a dad?
One of my favorite memories of Rod as my husband. It's hard to pinpoint one, but as Mike has been sharing, there are so many different ways that he did things that are kind of special for me to remember. As I said, it's hard to think of just one, but
Yeah, that's okay.
he's
We can come back to that one for both you guys if you'd like to think about it.
yeah, that's a
We'll
special
come back to it.
thing.
Is there a family tradition or activity that Rod started that you both still carry on or think about?
A family tradition. That we just think about.
Or that you carry on? I
Well,
know we do things like Knott's Berry Farm.
Mm-hmm.
We did that. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was.
Every Thanksgiving. I always like that.
That's a
We
memory.
were. You know how that started, and it helps to kind of repeat what you're asking, because sometimes if it doesn't come up on the sound, then people don't know what I'm talking about. One of the things that's a tradition that we did, we started going to Knott's Berry Farm because we had the day off after Thanksgiving. And it wasn't that often that we had days off. He took only one day off a week. It was like a Monday for a long time. But to have the day off on a Friday after a Thanksgiving, his brother told him about this place called Knott's Berry Farm. And it didn't cost anything to go in. So that was one of the big features that helped us
It costs money to get down there.
to
but-
go down there for a little outing. So we started going down there because it was, you didn't even have to pay to park, and we would go there and walk around, have an enjoyable time. We didn't even eat at the little famous chicken place that they have that we have
Yeah.
gone to later. We would go outside somewhere because it was less expensive. And we just thought that was the most fun, that we could just walk around that place. And sometimes we did spend the finances to stay overnight down there after a while. And we'd walk around it the next day even. But that became a tradition. That was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
And it didn't cost us hardly anything. It cost us like 25, 35 cents for the little merry-go-round ride that the kids would go on first. But we went there, and that was very enjoyable. And we've done that for years after that. Just,
And so you guys went when
Yes.
you were like kids.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we started going pretty consistently when I was a little bit older, like probably junior high, late grade school years is when
Yeah.
we started really doing it more frequently, and that
Yeah.
became pretty consistent for 20 years, 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, memory that I think about with my dad growing up, what are the things that I would say are things that I kind of carried through that I do. He was a paper reader. He would read the paper. He'd get the paper every day. And he would grab that newspaper, and in the morning he would have his coffee and read the paper if he wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to do that too. So I was like, well, my dad does that, I want to do that too. I remember he'd put his hand on his coffee. I don't know if you remember him doing this, but he'd have his coffee and he'd put his hand on top of the lid or on top of the mouth of it. That was to keep it warm. And someone saw me do that yesterday or day before, and they're like, "Why are you? What's your hands on your coffee?" I was at Waffle House with a bunch of guys Monday, before I came out, and they're like, "What your hand is on your coffee cup?" And I was like, "My dad taught me that. He put his hands on there to keep the steam in there." And it's like, I like my coffee hot. I don't like it too cold.
Yeah, that's good.
I got that from Grandpa.
Yeah.
I like
That's
that a
good.
lot. What's one quality in Rod that each of you admired the most?
Kind of like the other question a little bit.
Yeah,
One
it
of-
kind of is. Yeah, sorry.
One
That's
of
right.
one of the callings that he had.
What is one quality in Rod that each of you admired the most?
One quality that I can say I admire is his faithfulness to stick to what he was determined to do. And the fact that he did that, his life still goes on, because that quality is something that helped me after he was gone to have the determination to keep just being faithful and not give up, because I know that the Lord's in charge, and you just don't give up on life. You just keep going, because things can be very hard sometimes for people, and they need to have an example that you can keep going in life, and
Sure.
that's one thing that I just really appreciate from him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, unless you wanted to add a bit more.
I'll add one thing. He, this was hard for me in some ways because I didn't get to see my dad as much because he was always at church. But at the same time, I admire this about him because he was faithful to do that. So he would say, "I got to go calling." I was like, "Calling?" That's what he meant when he was going to go visit someone at their house, and maybe they were a new attendee at the church, and he wanted to talk to him about, becoming a Christian or coming to church or membership. But he would also go visit people at the hospital, and he did that faithfully for years.
I can tell you that he was so faithful to do that one of the enjoyable things that our family did was the fact that the children were very small. And even Regina had to go to school the next day. But there would be someone in the hospital down in the valley. One was Virginia Temple's husband was in the hospital at the military hospital down there. And we would pop in the car, and that would just be more enjoyable to go down there, and we would sit in the car and wait while he went in and saw the individual.
He'd visit for 45 minutes to an hour. We'd be sitting there
And
with
then-
our books, reading, or a toy.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
heard stories from my mom, yeah.
But then we would
We'd go out to dinner.
we would go eat a bite together, and that's together time. That's
Yeah.
family time, and that's why eating is such an enjoyable thing to be together and talk and whatever. So that was, and then the kids would go to sleep on the way home, and it was part of our life.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a great counselor too. When people had problems, he would go and talk to them. He had a lot of years of psychology,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I told this in one of the other podcasts that he had so many years of training in psychology that all he had to do was the apprenticeship under a psychologist
Right.
for like a couple of years, whatever you do, and he could have put his sign up and said, come in and,
Marriage and family therapist.
a
kind of,
therapist and charge like people do exorbitant. He did this all for free. And he was just because he was good natured.
Mm.
He just did that kind of thing. So I really admire that,
Mm-hmm.
He understood how to talk to people. He gave great premarital counseling. Stuff that people still talk about when they talk about
Wow.
him. Yeah.
All right, a couple more questions for you guys.
Okay.
If Rod could give you advice today, what do you think he'd say to each of you?
If he could give us advice today, I'll say one thing. He would say, rejoice in the fact that Trump won.
Oh, he would have loved that.
Oh, yeah.
He was a
Yeah.
Trump fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He would. I think he would just say, keep living each day the best you can, knowing, the background of doing it with good integrity and love for other people. I think that he would say that.
I like that.
I think he'd say, to me, don't be so hard on yourself. He used to say that a lot.
Yeah.
Because he would see the good things in people. And, like in my case, I'm critical of myself or hard on myself for things that aren't going well in my mind. But he'd be like, look at all these things that are going well. So
Sure.
give yourself some slack,
Right.
and he was good about being patient. He wasn't, he was a patient person, but that takes discipline. Everybody's impatient. We can all be impatient and want to have something done right away. And I may be, I don't know, my dad was impulsive in some ways. He would do, especially when it came to cars and gadgets.
Yeah,
He would like things that were like nice, But I see that's where I got the same gene, I think, and I get that way too. And Jana's not that way at all. I mean, she's definitely like, we don't need that. We don't have to buy that.
Right.
Which I appreciate. Mom's the same way, Grandma. But he would just be like, don't be so hard on yourself. And I think, and he would also, just see the bigger picture. If you were struggling through something, he would say, it'll work out. Just, trust in God. He'll give you a good path. And
Yeah.
I think that's a good summary of what I would feel. The same thing. The idea that everybody is going to have those valleys in life too, and the fact that you have the encouragement to keep moving on. Yeah.
Last question. Betty, if you could share one message with Rob today, what would you tell him? And Mike, is there something you'd want him to know?
If there was one message I would share with him, I would say very easily how happy I was to be Mrs. Rodney Allee, and to I think the fact that the Lord allowed that to be, and He could foresee what our life would be, which I couldn't tell, but I just was absolutely so pleased that my life worked out, that I had him for my beloved husband. That's what I'd tell him.
So I spent a lot of my life with my biggest fan was my dad. You know, I mean, my whole life. So proud of me, you know. He was always my advocate and, you know, always there to, you know, encourage me like we were just talking a minute ago. You know, hang in there, you can do it, whatever. But I'd like to say that I was very proud of him. Um, you know, you don't, until you get older, you don't realize, and I'm not that old, but I don't feel old, but I'm getting older, you know, getting close to 60 like your mom and dad, you know. And you start to look back on your life a little bit and you see the things that are important and the things that are not. And I'd say the things that are not important are how fancy your house is and how much career attainment you have and how much money you have and all the things that the world kind of pushes on you, and you'd be surprised how much we buy into that. And you know, we're really hard on ourselves. Like I was saying, that's one of the things my dad would say to me is, don't be so hard on yourself, you're doing a lot of good things. Sure. Right? But then I look at the sacrifices that he made, and you know, he was very sharp. You know, Grandpa was very capable of doing, and he talked about, you know, having a job working on computers and stuff back in the old days, and he could have probably turned that into something pretty lucrative, you know. And yet he didn't do that, and he made choices, that he felt at peace about, and he knowingly made the sacrifice of never pursuing great wealth or achievement to follow his calling as a pastor. And as I look back at that life that he lived, I'm very proud of him. Yeah. You know, I think, you know, it's you could do a lot worse. Oh yeah. You know.
As you really think about it, it's about as good as you can get when you think about that.
Right.
And the fact that he had so much influence on other people's life means that his example keeps living on.
Oh, for sure. He left a legacy.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing is this is honestly true. You can find people that are extremely successful that don't leave a legacy. And it's like, what was it all about? Oh, they made a lot of money. Right. They won the game of business. So what?
Yeah.
You know, it's really about those lives you touch. It's really about using your giftedness in a way that's true and genuine and authentic. And that was Grandpa. Yeah. You know, and it's like, you know, the other thing is, it's like being happy with little things, being satisfied with, you know, hey, that's my favorite chair, you know, or this is, you know, I'm comfortable in this room with my old TV. I don't need all this fancy stuff. And man, I'm really seeing the value of all that now. I'm really starting to, and it takes you decades to get there, where you start to go, I don't need all the things of the world to, you know, like we watch, you know, Jan and I will watch these. She won't let me watch any of this stuff. I'm like, wow, we need to do this to our kitchen. We need to do that. And she's like, I'm happy with what we have. We don't need that. Yeah. I'm like, golly, I mean, really? You know, and so, but the reality is she's right. And we don't need all that fancy stuff. And all that is like, you know, chasing after the latest and greatest, but you really don't need that stuff. Right. You don't. And I think my dad, you know, did a ton with what he was given. He took the raw material of a very difficult childhood and upbringing and turned it into something really special. So
left a great legacy and a great family, and we miss him and we love him.
We do.
Mike, thanks for coming on the podcast. I love you.
Love you too.
And Grandma, I love you.
Thank you for doing this, Christian. That's very special.
Thanks, Christian.
Of course. Love you guys.
Love you too.